Hello, everybody. This is Pasha Marlowe, and you are at the Let's Pleasure Be the Measure podcast. With us today is Maureen McCarthy Darling, who is a therapist and a friend and a colleague and another fabulous woman who lives right around my town. People are like, how do you have so many phenomenal women living in your neighborhood and town? I don't know. Maybe I'm lucky. Maybe I'm a magnet for it. Maybe all these fabulous women are everywhere and we just need to seek them out. But you are one of them. Maureen McCarthy Darling is a 30-year licensed clinical social worker and recently a life coach, transforming the lives of women through her Women's Wisdom and Awakening group. She releases paralyzing beliefs and limiting beliefs and moves people onto their path of true discovery and joy. I will let Maureen tell you more, but I'm excited to have you here, Maureen.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Pasha. I am thrilled to be with you and my neighbor and my friend and another magnificent coach and therapist.
Thank you. We have a unique perspective of coming from the world of therapy, and you're still, I know, dabbling and transitioning. I left it a while ago, but it does bring us a different perspective of the constructs of therapy, which are different than the constructs of life coaching. So, how has that transition been for you? Just out of curiosity, are you enjoying it? Like the
Yeah,
change?
yeah. I think when I look at how I even approached therapy, I was always very start where the client is.
Mm-hmm.
Clients would come in, especially if they had worked with someone else and say, oh, I don't want to start from the beginning of my life and I don't want to have to repeat everything. And I always would say, we're going to start where you are. We're going to
Mm-hmm.
start why you're here. And if what something that happened in your past is relevant, it's going to come up
Yeah.
and we'll connect the dots. So I've always been very proactive, very engaged, very instructional in my work with clients anyway, giving homework, doing something to keep the movement going. And
Mm-hmm.
everything I do, I approach from a perspective of, is this healing?
Yes.
Taking a walk can be healing.
Yes.
Or therapeutic. I love the word therapeutic. And we look at it as only therapy. And I say, you could do something that for you is going to be extremely therapeutic. It may not be
Right.
in the context of being in someone's office. So I look at
Absolutely.
everything I do and my offerings as, is it more healing? Is it more therapeutic? Is it more life enhancing? And will it get this person, particularly women, moving into their greatness so that, guess what? They just can't keep it to themselves.
Right. They just become so empowered. They have to share.
That's
I
right.
I call my line of work now therapeutic comedy. So I'm kind of combining the two. But I remember when I was a therapist, and this is back in the 90s, but I wasn't able to, within the constructs of therapy at that time, take a client out for a walk. It just wasn't, you just stayed in your office. And I found that very limiting. So I'm glad that it's expanding. But even with that expansion, what do you feel like people gain from you as a coach that they might not have
Mhm.
as a therapist?
Yeah. Well, I think again, a lot of the philosophy between coaching and therapy is like, oh, keep them very separate. And it's like taking someone who's been, let's say, in the business world and building and building and becoming an expert over 30 plus years. Would you say, well, so leave that behind because that might be a conflict of interest, where I'd say, I'm going to bring every single thing I've learned so far
Yeah.
because, doing it for this long, doing it in my own life, in my own healing journey,
Mm-hmm.
why would I leave it out? So I am really finding that I'm really masterful, especially with women, in connecting the dots. And I like to call it weaving. I feel like I'm
Mm.
weaving because it might be something from the past over here, and I bring it over here. And it's creating this beautiful, beautiful, solid
Mm.
piece that they're discovering or we're discovering together.
That's a beautiful image. You should use that for your marketing, how you weave it all in.
Yeah.
Yes, it's like you're creating this beautiful, quilt of all the different
Yeah.
aspects of their life and bringing in all of your different work and gifts and modalities. Right, because once you've learned something, it's hard not to incorporate it and integrate it into a session. So yes, your clients are fortunate to have you with 30 years of experience and wisdom and perspective. So that's fantastic. And right now you're focusing on women and women's wisdom. What do you mean by that?
Good question. Wisdom. Well, I feel like, and again, in claiming, I speak to you on this as well, and you and I have talked, personally and privately. The more I claim and truly just acknowledge, wow, I have done this. Like I have 30 years of experience working with a huge population of different people over the course of my
Mm-hmm.
life. And I'm so grateful in what I have learned there from the work and from my clients, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Now I'm forgetting your question.
Wisdom, what you meant by
Wisdom, thank you.
wisdom.
Yeah, so for me, it's sharing my knowledge and is sharing my wisdom.
Yeah,
And
nice.
I want to do the same for other women because, whether you're 28 or 75,
Mm,
there's the sort of the quilt again. Where are our stories that are of value, not only to me, but to other women?
yes.
How have you not only survived something, but actually are thriving because of the experience that you had, that you lived through?
Yeah.
And how can you reframe that so that it is a benefit to you versus that it's one of those places that you are continued to be blocked and paralyzed?
Yes. And that reminds me of our ancient wisdom, our inherited wisdom, which of course, unfortunately, often goes hand in hand with inherited traumas, but that too provides us perspective and wisdom. So do you often with your clients um, go back before their birth to generations of knowledge and wisdom that their ancestors held?
I absolutely do. And even if we do not know the stories of our
Hmm.
ancestors, absolutely, I say, what may be affecting you now? It lives in your body, and
Hmm.
it's an absolute thing that we carry on from our DNA and our ancestors.
Yes.
So if our ancestors, for instance, came over one or two generations ago so that they immigrated to the United States,
Hmm.
well, did they come with $5 in their pocket?
Hmm.
Did they come, and I'm of Irish descent, Irish need not apply.
Mm.
So what was the struggle? How did they survive? And we are in, hopefully more so for many of us, not everyone, more in a time period where we potentially can thrive. We don't have to be in such survival mode as perhaps our ancestors had to be.
But we might have inherited some of those limiting beliefs about money, for instance, if there was that aspect in our
Absolutely.
heritage.
Or
Yes. Hmm.
tying into pleasure.
Hmm.
Who
Thank
has
you.
who
Thanks for
has
tying it back.
time, who has time or the luxury of
Yes.
pleasure,
Yes.
let alone maybe emotional states that are vulnerable?
Yes.
It's not safe to be
Yes.
vulnerable if you're trying to survive.
Yes. And my heritage is German and
Mhm,
English, neither of which value
mhm.
pleasure. It's not at the top of their list, right?
Yeah,
And so I was raised to believe that pleasure is selfish,
mhm,
that laziness, leisure means laziness,
mhm.
right? Idleness means death. And so I'm wondering what kind of limiting beliefs you hear from women typically around the idea of pleasure and
Yeah.
um,
Yeah,
rest and relaxation.
I don't often even use the word pleasure because
Mm,
I know how that's going to be like. It's gonna there's such pushback. The
mm,
pushback, I'll say, so tell me something, one of the things that you're proud about yourself. Yep.
interesting.
There can be pushback right there. Oh,
Mm,
I shouldn't speak. Yeah, basically, I'm not supposed to speak highly of myself, or I'm not supposed to speak about myself at all.
right.
And I forget, and then I'm stunned,
Yeah.
usually, again, by the response, and I'll go, "Okay, let's break it down. Let's
Mhm.
break it down. Let's see. Okay, we've been working together for 6 months or a year. Oh, okay. Well, from my perspective and what you've told me, you're a really good mother, and you're a really good mother because of these things."
Mhm.
Okay. People have such difficulty taking it in.
And claiming it and
Absolutely, and
bragging about it or being proud of it.
allowing it. I remember, Pasha, when I had, a women's group way back in my first private practice in Boston, and it was one of the participants' birthdays. So off the cuff, I said, "Oh, I want to do something for your birthday." So I gave her my chair. It was a high back, sort of a queen chair. It was a hand me
Nice.
down, but I was like, oh, I like this. So I said, sit in here and we're going to be nearby, but across, and we're going to just sit. And I said, your job is to receive,
Mhm.
cross your arms and legs. I didn't want, this.
Right.
And we're going to just sit for a moment in silence. And then we're going to start telling you what we see.
Mm.
And it was just something like beautiful,
Mm.
articulate, whatever that person we saw in them, truly.
Sure.
And you would have thought we were shooting arrows at her,
Yeah.
and I'm not, I could replace her with so many women
Yeah.
where it was hard to receive what was true.
And did it almost hurt, do you think, when in relation to the arrow metaphor, do you think it hurt because it felt so foreign, or was it scary in its vulnerability to be seen, or even acknowledge
Yeah.
that mirror
Mm.
and
I
how disconnected that is from our own sense of self?
Yeah, I think it's my perspective is generally it's foreign.
Mm-hmm.
If we look at even when we were growing up, or how boys got a lot of the attention in the classrooms, how boys were, the hands were the boys, even when I watch, I turn on a television show, it is highly unlikely, it's changing, but it's highly unlikely that if there's an ensemble cast, it will be more males than females.
Mm-hmm.
Usually it used to be one female and the rest were males.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's like, okay, there's two females and there's four males.
Right. Right. Right.
So again, I think it is so pervasive,
Mm-hmm.
the messaging to women, that we are providers, we are nurturers, we are the life-giving ones, we
Mm-hmm.
are the life-sustaining ones, literally, if we are mothers of some sort or another. And that's our job. We
Mm-hmm.
should not need to be sustained. We should not need to be seen. We
Mm-hmm.
should not need to be heard. So that's the extreme.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then what happens around midlife when motherhood is not as active? Our kids are starting to grow up. We're starting to lose people, lose our parents, lose our partners, lose our peers. And then this existential crisis comes over and we're like, oh, I forgot about me.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And is that the transition time or the catalyst moment for a lot of your clients? Is that not just empty nesting, but
Mhm.
that kind of
Yeah.
midlife movement?
Yeah. When I had my office probably about 2 years ago, I was like, I joked and I said, you could see my windows from the street. And I was like, do I have a neon sign in the window that's saying midlife women, midlife women? Because all of a sudden, all these midlife women started to come in.
Yeah.
And as you said, one came in, she didn't have children. And she was like, what the hell? What is going
Mm,
on? What
mm.
am I supposed to be doing? Where am I? And I was like, oh, this is exciting. These are great questions.
Yes,
Because
that lights me up
to
too.
me, like you were talking about moving, to me, it's like, oh, there's a change coming.
Yes, and some of us prefer more change than others, but I think there's something about the opportunity of midlife, whether we have children that are launched or not. But I think there's this chance for us to redesign our life, and all of the hormonal changes and physical changes and emotional changes that take place in midlife, it's hard not to notice them. And so here they are in our face. We're like, oh, okay, something's got to change. Otherwise, we tend to feel quite stuck in our patterns, stuck in our situations, and in our conditioning. So yeah, it's quite liberating to break free from that, and so helpful to have somebody like you to hold safe space for that process to happen.
Yeah, because it can be, again, starting in a fear-based place.
Right.
And guess what? Here's the path you can go down. Oh gosh, this means my life's been a failure.
Mhm.
Because now I
Mhm.
don't even know what I'm supposed to do yet, and I'm 55 years old, let's say, right?
Right.
And it's
Mhm.
like, well, no, there are other paths. There are
Mhm.
other paths of about like going back to pleasure. What brings you joy?
Mhm.
What brings you pleasure? What
Mhm.
lights you up? What
Yes.
brings you alive? When I feel most alive, I sort of almost get to feeling like I'm shaking. I am shaking
Mhm.
with life. You know, it's a physical feeling. And I
Yes.
don't live there all the time. I wish I could. They'd be like, here goes Maureen. She's vibrating along.
I think that's why some people like me do lives and podcasts, because like I miss that feeling of it, which is a bit thrilling and scary, but that aliveness, those butterflies in the stomach. Like I can't move every day, so I have to, make my fun.
Yeah.
So yeah, finding things that light us up and
Yeah.
bring us. And for somebody, it might be like sitting in a comfy chair reading a book, but another person might need to skydive, and both are good. They're
That's
both
right.
good.
That's right. Absolutely. And it's the question of, please allow the question to the listeners of what brings it. And if pleasure is too hard of a word, because it can be affiliated, we can go to religious organizations,
Mhm.
we can go to authority organizations, we can go to bosses organizations of things that we've been told, which are not supposed to be allowed. And it's like, well, wait a minute. There are things that bring you joy. There are things that bring you pleasure.
Mhm.
So don't
Mhm.
forget that. That's what I would start with. Don't forget that because it is there. Everyone, unless they're in a severe state of depression in that moment, um, can remember. They may not feel like they can attain it at all times.
Yes.
But for me, like turning on a piece of music, I used to have this older phone and it had ringtone choices, and I clicked on one and I absolutely loved it. It was very Latin, and every single time my phone rang, it made me want to dance, and I couldn't control myself. And I'm like,
That's
I've got to get a ringtone like that because it
yes.
sparked my joy every time the phone rang.
That's wonderful. That's a great tip is, whether it's your text ding or your phone ding, yes, make it something fun that lights you up and makes you want to wiggle a little bit. That can pull you through a difficult moment and then change your day. Those little tiny things that we sneak in and sprinkle in. And you mentioned depression. And I've battled depression and anxiety before, and I do still have days where I'm kind of really heavy in the fog, it feels like, and need to curl up with a blankie and get through it. And I'm starting to learn to find pleasure in sitting in that, like sitting in the sadness, in the sense that it's like this, I feel so alive right now in this pain, in this grief, in this sadness, that this is so much part of what life is, that yes, I'm blessed to be able to also access the joy and the pleasure and the laughter, but that it's only because I have those deep lows and experience the darkness that the highs are so very high right now and apparent to me. So I'm trying to embrace it all, and it's hard.
Yeah. Well, no, that's an incredible example though, Pasha. And I am someone who is, I think this ties into, I know some of the newer avenue you're taking as well, which is ADD or ADHD. And I also have that. And with that often very much comes anxiety and depression. It's
Mhm.
part of the neurological system. And that will
Mhm.
be for another podcast. But
Mhm.
but um but I love that where you say it is part. I do believe that the depths of the depression I've experienced in my life makes my joy that much greater as well. And there is a fine line, which I do want to speak to, is there is a place for people who are struggling with depression, that what we're talking about is like you and I are saying, we know now how to access and pull ourselves out as well as being present with it. But
Mhm.
for some with depression, it can be just such a deep, dark black hole that
Mhm.
even what we're talking about seems impossible. And that's where,
Absolutely.
again, I would, of course, put out, please seek really good help for that, because I don't want to diminish the
Yeah.
struggle of someone with severe depression.
Thank you. Yes. And I mean, this sounds like a good opportunity to normalize mental illness and medication. I take medication. I'll just speak for myself, that I take medication for ADHD.
Mhm.
I take medication for hormones, and I take medication to help me sleep because of PTSD. And I've processed a lot of shame in limiting beliefs around not being able to be holistic and clean, and there comes a time where we make a decision as to what is safest or healthiest for us at that moment. So it's really great to hear from a therapist, who also empowers women
Mhm.
to say it's okay to ask for help. It's
Mhm.
okay to talk to your doctor or therapist about your depression, your mental illness, and it's also okay to ask for meds to help you through.
Absolutely, absolutely. And again, how would that potentially bring someone to more pleasure and joy?
Mm-hmm.
And there's so much stigma, especially around medication for our neurological challenges and depression and anxiety and many of the others,
Mm-hmm.
where I have talked repeatedly to clients, and I never was a huge component of it, but I have seen it help people
Yeah.
like nothing else.
Yes.
And I'm not saying across the board. It is quite a undertaking to find
Mhm.
potentially a medication that can be helpful. But again, yeah, all the different avenues. Our medical model has some great things for us and some
Mhm.
things we might say, we need to change some of the direction of our medical model.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's so good for us to forgive ourselves and give each other grace. And sometimes just surrendering. Today I was thinking, okay, what are the things I can control? What are the things I can't control? Try to release and surrender to those things that are out of my control. Try to build strength and courage in the things I can. And it's a daily practice. It's a daily practice, and it's humbling and scary. And sisterhood or a coach or a therapist, I don't know. I don't know what I'd do without
That's right.
those. So,
Well, I think excellent, excellent point, Pasha. I just finished a coaching group, and it was the first real experience of sisterhood in a
mm,
coaching group
yeah,
that made all the difference for me.
nice.
It was us in our journey to bring more to the people we're trying to serve,
Yeah.
but also doing it in an honest and authentic way as women. So that if the challenge is, okay, get a video up or do something, well, it's scary, especially at first. And guess what? When you can speak that in your group and say, oh, I can't do it. I feel stuck or I'm scared or it's that for me, it's the first step usually. First steps
Hmm.
are my hardest. Once I do it, I'm like, okay, I'm alive. I'm still alive. I did it. And I'm watching you and I'm like, oh my God, Pasha is such an inspiration. I can't even keep up with you with all the incredible directions you're going. And I love the variety of directions that you're going as well.
ADHD, creative
Well,
mind.
I love that. I'm like, I don't have that kind of ADHD. I do, but I don't. And I go, okay, you know, and then we have to, again, pleasure, we have
Yeah.
to watch for. So if I observe what Pasha's doing in her work brilliantly, guess what? I have to watch for what happens when I'm watching Pasha do these great offerings and go, what meaning am I going to give it? Am I going to give it that I'm not doing it as well as Pasha? Am I going to give it that she's doing it better or I can't? Or, all the little places we assess. We assess every single thing, every single day. Our
And
minds
wait,
are yes, no, good, bad, right, wrong, on and on and on. It's our
absolutely.
primal brain.
And I could admire somebody's work and aspire to it and then try it on and it's not in my pleasure. And I'm
Mhm,
like, oh, well, that's just not my style.
mhm,
It's not gonna light me up every day. So it's what you're saying is so good. Like let's look at other people and see whether what we can aspire to and rise to and really tap into our inner knowing and intuition and our own personal energy and lifestyle and all of our circumstances and say, okay, you know, this is possible and this is in my pleasure. Okay, this feels aligned with my personality, purpose, and passion. So yeah, it's a constant reevaluating though,
mhm.
and
Yeah,
making
well,
sure.
and even putting out those offerings, Pasha, I don't know if you've put out any where you say, I'm going to change that one up,
Yes, you can
or I'm
change
going
it.
to let that one go and not view it as a failure.
Yes.
Because I think the only failure, and it's so easy because the first steps for me are the hardest. That's
Yeah.
where I get the most paralyzed. I'm more prone to not do it
Hmm.
if the first step is the hardest. But
Yes.
again, incorporating support by another coach or therapist, support of sisterhood, of women friends that are brilliant that say, go
Hmm.
for it, stumble. I have a new private Facebook group. I'm like, okay, I'm doing it. I want to do it well and I don't care because I'm doing it.
You're doing
I'm
it.
I'm giving, I'm saying,
Yes.
here it is. If you don't like it, that's okay. And I'm having fun and I'm picking
Good.
pretty colors and I'm writing. I'm doing more writing and, you know,
Excellent.
so it's
Yeah.
that allowing what we need to break out of, which is the
Mhm.
lies that have been
Mhm.
living in women for way too long.
Mhm.
And we need to help each other continue to rise from that and find what truly is our voices as women.
Yes,
Because we
absolutely.
even repeat the patriarchy without knowing it.
Mhm.
I'll give you an
Mhm.
example. This was many years ago. I had a friend who had a baby, and I had just got married, had no children, and we're on the phone, and she says, "Well, the doctor who delivered my baby," and it struck me in that moment. And I
Mm.
said, FedEx delivers. I said, they ring your doorbell and they hand you a package. And I said, you delivered your baby.
Mhm.
No one else. I don't care if you've had a cesarean. I don't care if you've adopted. I don't care if your child came out your ear. You grew a human being and you delivered your baby with some assistance.
Mm.
And I feel very strongly about that because women
Mm.
deliver their babies.
Mm.
Women go through this process of birthing, which is intense.
Mhm.
And to say that the doctor who delivered my baby, for me, it takes complete credit away from what actually
Mhm.
has truly just happened.
Yeah, and yet that is in our languaging. That's interesting, and I'm sure there's 100 examples of things that we say like that
Yeah.
that we just don't even recognize are in our language, and yet take away our power. So
That's
yeah,
right.
I think that's good to raise our awareness to that, how we phrase things. The doctor that I'm sure I've said that. I'm sure I've said that
Of course.
myself.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So good changes are coming. Good changes are coming.
Yeah, I've heard so many women say, this is the year of the woman, this is the year of the vulva. Like, I feel that. And actually, we're quite fortunate because I feel especially this way in this Portland, Maine, lovely
Mhm.
area where I feel like our community supports
Mhm.
entrepreneurs and female leaders and women and is inclusive. So I feel really good about this. So I'm not moving from Maine. I'm just moving down the street, by the way.
Yay. Yay.
Because I get bored so easily.
Tasha's just moving. She's already rising. She's just moving down the road.
This is the kind of move that could be done in a minivan. I don't even need like to hire a U-Haul truck. We're just gonna make 100 different minivan trips. So Maureen, how could people reach you if they want to join your group or hire you as a coach?
Yeah. Oh, great. Great question. Well, my website is under construction right now. Right?
That's what it's called. That'd be funny.
Under, under
Under
construction.
construction
It
right
is. If you look it
now.com.
up, it'll probably say that. And that is easy to remember. It is MaureenDarling.com. And Maureen is spelled because it can be tricky. Maureen, and darling as it sounds.
Darling.
I'd love for people to come over and into my Maureen Darling's Circle of Wisdom Awakening. And that is for men and women because that's my free private Facebook group. So I'm just making offerings there and getting on my feet there, and we'll start
Nice.
posting videos and such. They can also message me there, or they can send me an email at maureendarling.com.
Maureen at maureendarling.com. And of course, in the show notes, I always include ways to reach our guests. So that will be easy for you all. And hopefully, this conversation was inspiring, empowering, or just like awakened a different part of your mind, body, spirit that was needing to be awoken today, that it served you at the exact right time. And reach out to either of us to continue the conversation. We'd love to. We'd love to talk to you, meet you. So thank you, Maureen, for coming.
My pleasure, Pasha. Thank you. Thank you for creating this
You're welcome.
and being who you are. Again, you're an inspiration. You light up the world. And thanks so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure as well. Always a pleasure. Pleasure to talk to you all out there. And If any of you out there like this conversation and want to hear more, if you subscribe to the podcast, you get notifications. And then it makes the podcast look better, which is good for us so we can continue to sustain it. And we're looking for sponsors, people who want to sponsor the podcast. So if you're out there with a service or a product and you think Let Pleasure Be the Measure is a good podcast platform for you, I would love to talk. So thank you all for being here, and we'll see you soon.
All right. Thank you, Pasha.
Bye. Thanks, Maureen.